5 interesting stories from the news this week. Car keys are once again found to be not as secure as we think they are. Hackers are exploiting fear of an interesting coronavirus to send malware and ransomware. Another Android security app is found to be actually spying on the people who install it. Yet another cloud database leak. And how good are password managers? Should we trust them? All this on This Week in Cybersecurity with me, the Code Curmudgeon. Car keys. In particular, car key remotes. You know, that little thing that you press the button on. So, these things have a little bit of encryption in them to make sure that it's only you unlocking your car, unlike your garage door at home, which is probably super easy to unlock. Almost every modern car, everyone I've heard of, uses a keyless system now, and people have been finding lots of interesting ways to exploit these things. And sometimes they're really, really clever. We've talked about this in the past. I'm pretty sure we did. I'll put a link somewhere if we did. Sometimes they do all kinds of crazy things like intercepting a signal and sending a fake signal out. Sometimes they just clone it. In this case, they found out that they could easily clone the keys. And it was several manufacturers, Toyota, Hyundai, and Kia were some of the manufacturers. I don't know that it was all of them, but in this particular research, that's what they found. They use a Texas Instruments encryption called DST80, which I understand allows 80-bit cryptography, but as it turns out, the researchers were looking, and many of the implementations of these keys were only using 24-bit. Now, once upon a time, 24-bit encryption was thought to be really, really good, and it would take like some amount of hundreds of years of all the supercomputers in the world to crack such a thing. That was probably never true or never accurate, but the truth is that these days, 24-bit encryption is not really that difficult with modern processors and GPUs and multi-cores and big computers available and cloud instances available. So as it turns out, what the manufacturers are doing just isn't very sufficient to the task at hand. So as these things always go, the researchers went and talked to the manufacturers. The manufacturers said, hey, we did a good job, and haven't really done what they need to do. Luckily, it's not as bad as when these problems first occurred, where the manufacturers were literally lying or trying to cover it up or sue people. But they've really got to start stepping it up. They can't use 24-bit encryption. They've got to use the highest thing they can get, because the car is supposed to last more than a year or two, right? A good car, I expect to get 5 or 10 years out of, right? At least. A really good car, an expensive car, it should last me 10 years. And in 10 years, who knows where computing horsepower is going to be. Wired magazine was one of the people involved in breaking this story, and they reached out to the car manufacturers and Texas Instruments as well. And Kia and Texas Instruments didn't respond. Hyundai noted that none of the affected models are sold in the U.S., so I guess in the U.S. you're okay. I guess if you're outside the U.S., don't buy a Hyundai because someone can steal your car. I don't know. Kind of crazy. Toyota said that it's only older models. So I guess there's no easy way to fix it. I don't know. But just one of those things. They say it's a low risk for customers because it requires, quote unquote, a high level of sophistication and expensive equipment. The researchers dispute that, and as always, it doesn't require either sophistication or expensive equipment. The equipment is cheap, it's readily available. In terms of sophistication, the person who figured it out was sophisticated, but once these things are known, they're available. The exploits are out there. So it might have been sophisticated right up until the moment that someone figured it out. So be careful with your car. Don't leave important stuff in it. Make sure you have insurance. Lock your doors anyway, even though maybe it's not as useful as you think. Follow the link down below. It's pretty interesting stuff. Coronavirus. Okay, it's in the news everywhere. I can't avoid talking about it. I've been trying to avoid talking about it. But it turns out that coronavirus is creating all kinds of opportunities for hackers and bad actors. So I've got a couple links down below, but the basic stories, there's 3 different parts of this one. One is that bad actors are exploiting our interest in and our fear of coronavirus. So they're sending out things that, phishing emails that say coronavirus in them and have a bad payload attached, or they're posting things on bad websites, or they're creating fake coronavirus information websites. They're posting things on social media with bad payloads that are, the usual stuff, right? They're malware, their spyware, their ransomware, etc. So just be aware. If you're looking for coronavirus information, make sure you're getting it from solid sources. Don't just click random things. And if it's coronavirus in the URL at the moment, I'd be very suspicious. I know that there are some good sites that are going to use that, but I wouldn't go to them, and I would recommend you don't either. The second thing is that there's a coronavirus tracking app. So another classic thing, right? Like, it sounds really interesting. Let me get this app, make it easier to get information, watch maps live. But basically, it's ransomware. You install this thing, and it threatens to leak out your social media info. I don't know, I could change my social media. Like, everything I've said on social media is public, right? Like, so am I that worried about it? I don't know. But also to erase everything on your phone. I don't know if that would really bother me either. I certainly wouldn't pay them 100 Bitcoin for it, but be careful. Again, right now, be extra vigilant. It might even be people door to door. I saw something on Facebook earlier today about people going door to door wearing white little, not really hazmat suits, but, like little surgery coveralls or whatever, disposable coveralls. Just be careful right now. Be careful out there, whether it's phone calls, whether it's people at the door, whether it's apps, whether it's websites, whether it's emails, social media. Just be real careful what you're clicking on. Stay safe and stay secure. The third one was an intelligence firm warning that hackers are creating fake websites and pretending to be the World Health Organization, or WHO, and sending emails and phishing, right? So they send it to your company or to your house and say, we're trying to collect data about this and that and the other thing, and they get confidential information. So just be super careful right now. Like, we want to help those who are truly trying to fight this pandemic, but let's just be sure they are who they say they are. And when you're trying to get information, hey, if you're in the US, go to CDC, right? That's the easy thing. Get your information there. That's going to be the best thing. I hope sometime I can stop doing these stories about bad apps. Frequently, these are ones in the Google App Store. I do personally believe that the Google Play Store has more problems with truly malicious applications than the Apple Store does. I could be wrong, but it just seems that way from what I'm reading, what I'm finding out. Google has been much more aggressive as of late, trying to track these things down and shut them down. They've certainly put a more strict set of guidelines around what apps can do. And as anyone with Android knows, you pull up your phone, you look at it, and there's just a billion permissions that an app is going to ask for. And I'm looking at it and going, why does my camera app need to read my phone logs? Like, it just doesn't, right? So I guess the answer there is check. When something's asking for permissions, think about it and think about whether you really need the app if it does something you're uncomfortable with. Or maybe the app can run if you deny the permissions. But in this case, it was called Clean Master. I'm going to throw the name out there because I do want to shame them. There was 1 billion installs, and basically it's one of those security tools, and it was just keeping track of everything you do. Even if you're doing private web browsing, it was tracking what sites you visited, how you scrolled on them, what search queries you were using, Wi-Fi access point names, etc. The company that made them says that it was doing this for people's own good and that it wasn't sending the data to China, it was sending it to an AWS server that happened to be outside the US. But the company behind this, which is called Sirlig, I think it's Sirlig, I don't know how it's pronounced, CIRLIG, they have, or is it Cheetah? There's a couple of different names here. Cheetah and Sirlig both. The company, the domain for the company and the company itself are registered in China. So again, China is not the cause of all the world's problems, but it's certainly a much more comfortable home for those who are trying to create malicious applications, malicious websites, malicious emails, etc. They don't crack down on that sort of thing. Aside from any nation-state issues, which isn't implicated here, but be careful where you get this stuff. As it turns out, it's often more of a problem than it is a help, so just be careful. Watch what you install, watch where it came from. Another week, another data leak. I could literally do every week a data leak, an antivirus software that was out of control, a piece of spyware, and an IoT thing. It would leave me one room for one new story every week. But I only wanted to talk about this just to make sure, because people hear me say that it's a huge problem, and unless you hear me say it all the time, maybe you don't understand how big the issue is. It's another case in AWS or S3 Bitbucket. People put data in these virtual instances of machines in the cloud, and it's a really great idea because it gives you scalable service in terms of size, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of local availability, to load balance your work, to go between multiple servers, etc. But people deploy these things without thinking much about it. And in fact, I've seen surveys where they mention that people think that it's AWS's problem to secure these things, and it certainly isn't. It's their problem to secure the machine they're running on. It's your problem when you stand up an instance that talks to the outside world to decide how you're going to let it talk and to whom. Because you might need it to talk to other things, or you might need it to talk to the public. So you got to secure these things. In this case, this appears to be linked to a smartphone app known as MCA Wizard. It's something about merchant cash advances and cash advances, controversial high-interest loans. I don't know. It's roughly 500,000 records, sensitive data. Where is it here? 425 gigabytes, including credit reports, bank statements, driver's license, Social Security, tax returns, scan checks, purchase orders, and more. So if you're deploying things in the cloud, make sure you're doing a better job. If you're using services of somebody, like maybe you're going to refinance your house or buy a house or sell a house, make sure that who you're dealing with is reputable, they're a well-known company. Ask a question. You don't have to really understand the answer necessarily, but ask, like, how do you secure the data? Is it stored in the cloud? What kind of methods do you use? What is your breach notification policy? And if they're hesitant about this, you should be hesitant about them. If they've got a ready answer, you're probably safe. So just one of those things, both as a user of cloud services, as a purveyor of cloud services, make sure that you're doing the right thing. And finally, password managers. We've talked about passwords to death, and we're going to keep doing it. You need to have a different password for everywhere you go. Don't be lazy and say, hey, my Google password and my Microsoft password and my Apple password are all going to be the same. Because inevitably, somebody's going to break into some system that has some of that password data. And you're going to have to change everything everywhere in your whole life. This is silly. Make sure you use a different password everywhere. We've talked about this in the past. I'll put the links on the screen right now. But basically, have a good long password that's easy to remember, and don't sign up at sites where you don't have to. Like, use PayPal and don't create an account at a site that you do business once a year. But try to keep your passwords reasonably difficult to guess, and use a password manager. And I'll tell you right now, the caveat at the end of this, it makes it sound like password managers are scary, but they're still better than not having one, because they force you to do, or allow you to do, enable you to do better password management. But there's a couple places where they're weak. So how do these things work? Well, sometimes there's an app on your phone or an app on your desktop, and it lets you look up a particular website or application, and you get your credentials in, and you either copy them by hand or you cut and paste them. Sometimes there's a little plug into the browser so it intercepts a website login, so when you're going to log into Google, it lets you plug in the password. In fact, Apple has one of these, and Microsoft has one of these, and Google has one of these, and Firefox has one of these. Some of them are actually on the smartphones as well. And again, there's an app, so it pulls your passwords. It generates passwords for you. Some of them do like security checkups and monitor different services so that if these apps that you're using, these services you're using have been hacked, they'll warn you to change your password. So they do some really cool things. But one of the things that they do on mobile devices is that they sometimes intercept the password input for an application, which is super convenient. Now, when I'm logging into my bank app, my password manager can fill that in for me. The problem turns out to be in this research that a lot of the vendors, and they didn't post which ones yet. This is a paper that's going to be published in September, so we'll revisit this. But the problem is that on a website, it's pretty easy to figure out what domain it is and make sure you're putting the right password in. In fact, a password manager is good protection against phishing, because if somebody sent you to google.com with an extra O, you might not notice it, but your password manager is going to fail to log you in because it's not google.com. So it protected you. The problem with the mobile apps is that they're trying to use some different things to make sure that the app is the right app, and they don't always do a really good job. And so sometimes fake apps can look like the real app and fool the password managers into getting your credentials. So just another area to be worried about. But still, Password Manager is a better way to go. When the research is published in September, we'll go into it in detail. If we have details about which password managers are better than others, I'll certainly let you know. In the meantime, still use them. It's a good idea. Use a different password everywhere. Change it from time to time. Use password checkups either through identity protection services or your password managers, so that when something's been breached, don't wait for that email from company XYZ that you bought something from telling you were breached. If the password manager tells you that they were breached, just change your password, even if you weren't part of it, and you'll get ahead of the curve. So with that, thumbs up if you liked the video. Thanks everybody. Stay safe out there. Stay secure out there. Hope you're all healthy.